Welcome, community, to this Product People event. We are streaming now live from YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitch, and we will also record the session, and this will be later then shared on our social media accounts. Today's community event is about outcome-based road mapping with Janna Bastow, co-founder and CEO of ProdPad. Before we go into her presentation, and then also the questions you can raise afterwards, let me introduce myself and very, very briefly Product People. My name is Alex. I'm a group product manager here with Product People. I'm with the company since over 1.5 years, nearly 2 years this year. I'm doing product since 8 years, was a software developer and also a startup founder. I worked with several companies already on behalf of Product People and also held multiple roles as full-time employee here in Berlin. At the moment, I'm an interim head of product in a real estate company. I have a diploma in web design development that helped me for sure in that endeavor and that career I'm having at the moment. What we do as Product People is, so we help companies to discover and deliver great products faster. We empower product management community with also events like this today to share knowledge generously whilst managing the unglamorous hands-on work as product managers and owners, product ops people or product leaders. As I said, besides this call, I'm also having an interim head of product management role. We do this on interim or fractional basis for 3 to up to 12 months and even longer if the client asks us to. We onboard super fast, align teams, and deliver outcomes quickly. We have like dozens of in-house product managers who are acting as interims. So we are not freelancers. And we have also a community from over 20,000 product management people all over the world. Before Janna's taking over basically screen sharing and presenting her slides and her talk, we have 3 questions, and the people here on Zoom can answer them directly in the chat. And these 3 questions are, so what is your biggest challenge when it comes to creating a product roadmap? And A, prioritization of the competing initiatives, balancing short-term versus long-term goals, aligning the roadmap with business objectives, or getting the buy-in from stakeholders, or maybe any other. Another question about product roadmaps. What product roadmap format do you use in your organization? So the timeline roadmap, the classical one, the now, next, later roadmap, a release roadmap, an outcome-based roadmap, or any other if you have. And the last question, as ChatGPT is still all over the place and people are talking about it and new tools are coming out every day. Do you use ChatGPT or any other AI tools in your day-to-day work? Simple yes or no. Give you a couple of seconds to answer that. You can also comment if you are on LinkedIn in the chat. We get this answer. I get this answer here in Slack. So no worries about that. Looking really forward also to the first 2 questions because they are very closely related to Janna's talk. And I'm seeing here the results. So the majority of these answers here for first question is balancing the short-term and long-term goals when it comes to creating a roadmap. On second position, prioritization of competing initiatives is a big challenge. And then the last one is aligning the roadmap with business objectives. It seems you don't have it. The problem of getting the buy-in with stakeholders, which is awesome. On the second question, what product roadmap format do you use in your organization? Timeline roadmap. So basically this classic format. Now, next, later, 33% already adopted a lot. It's awesome to see. We also see release roadmap and outcome roadmap as well on the basically shared third position. And then we have the last question here. Do you use ChatGPT or other AI tools in your day-to-day work? Yes, 44%, and no, 56%. Here, I really expected like far more, to be honest. But yeah, maybe you will get on that train later. And I think maybe even Janna has something to say about it. So thank you for the poll and thank you for your answers. Now, I'm happy to hand over to Janna Bastow, who is the co-founder of ProdPad, a software that helps product managers and leaders to plan and deliver better products. Janna also organizes ProductTank events around the world, and including also Mind the Product, who got acquired last year, which is a global community of product managers. Right? She likes to inspire great product conversations by asking, what problem are you trying to solve? Basically, the best question you can ask upfront. She is also doing tons of consulting and coaching internally and externally, which is awesome because it's also what we're doing at Product People. So we have common interests here. Thank you. Janna, I'm handing over to you. The mic is yours, and I'm also stopping sharing my screen so you can take over.
Great. Hey, thank you so much for the warm intro, and great to have you all here. Thanks for joining today. Let me share my screen and then we can start following along with what we'll be talking about today, which is around outcome-led roadmaps. And actually I found the question about what type of roadmap we're using an interesting one, because I think it's really difficult to classify roadmaps into types. You know, you have the timeline roadmap, which everyone I think can visualize what that looks like. You have a now, next, later, which is another distinct type. But then, you know, a release plan roadmap, you know, what does that actually look like? A lot of times they are similar to a timeline roadmap, or, you know, sometimes they're more like a now, next, later. It's hard to figure out where they fit in. And an outcome roadmap isn't necessarily different from a now, next, later roadmap, because a good now, next, later roadmap should also be outcome led. So regardless of the type of roadmap that you are aiming for, I think it's important to always focus on those outcomes and to you know, prioritize stuff in terms of what's most important for the business. So we're going to be talking about, you know, we're going to be getting the skinny on lean road mapping and OKRs today. Just to say, I mean, Alex, you did a great intro there, so I don't need to dwell on this, but it's really important to point out that I'm a product person myself at heart. I was a product manager before I started Mind the Product, that big community of product managers. I was a product manager before I started ProdPad. I just need a tool to do my own job. And I'm always happy to chat to product people. So if you want to reach out to me at any point in time, then you can find me on Twitter, or most places as simply Bastow. Reach out to me by email, find me on LinkedIn, say hi. I'm the only Janna Bastow there, and it'd be good to connect with you. And today's slides are available, so you don't need to take pictures or screenshots or whatever of this today. You can use that link at the very bottom of the page and at the very bottom of the slide there, and you'll be able to access the slides yourself. Now, I used to have really bad roadmap habits. I want to take you back because this is actually one of my old roadmaps from a company that I worked at years ago, and I was faithfully reproducing the roadmap. It was a wish list of features that our company had. I was putting it onto this timeline roadmap that I was presenting to my team and my board. Now, I wasn't the only one doing this. If you look at a screen grab from a Google image search result for product roadmap, you know, when I looked up how to do a roadmap, this is what I was faced with. So you'd have to forgive a young product manager for choosing a timeline roadmap as their formative choice, if this is the examples they have to go by. But it's the product manager who makes the roadmap. But where do these road mapping habits of, you know, creating these timeline roadmaps actually come from? It's not usually the product manager who chooses to do this. As a matter of fact, it's coming from external pressures, our bosses and executives. It's our sales teams and our investors who are asking the product people to make roadmaps full of features and dates and promises and put pressure on us to deliver on time, as if we can absolve them from questionable decisions that they've made about the business model and resources that they have, like selling things that don't exist. And when the roadmap fails to deliver, it looks bad on the product manager, but it's usually not the product manager who has a say in what goes into these failing roadmaps. I mean, it's no wonder that the product manager was once called one of the unhappiest jobs out there. So I don't blame anyone who's become a bit disenchanted with their roadmaps, who've had roadmaps filled with promises, but actually delivered failures. So I'm here today with one goal. I want to change your minds about lean road mapping and OKRs. I want to give you some talking points to change your team's minds about them and give you a guide on getting your team on board so you can move towards a leaner way of doing your road mapping. Starting this week, starting tomorrow when you're back in the office, you should be more prepared than ever to give your teams product direction in a really lean way. So, are we ready to go? Cool. So why are roadmaps letting us down? I mean, what was fundamentally wrong with this this format of the roadmap? I mean, this is how a lot of roadmaps look today. They certainly look like that back when I was doing roadmaps at my product job way back when. And I know that this format makes you look great today. Your board and your bosses certainly love when you can give them this level of certainty about what's going to be delivered and when, but it's setting you up for failure. See, if you deconstruct this format of the roadmap, you basically get a chart that maps out time versus things to do. You end up with this time on the x-axis that creates this timeline. And at first, it seems pretty easy and intuitive to use, especially in the very short term. But the further out you plan and the more you put on there, the harder it becomes to manage. And because that timeline sits at the top, always marching forward, no matter what you put on the roadmap, everything always includes a due date and a time estimate just by the format of this roadmap. And so what could go wrong? Well, you end up with these made up release dates that end up on the roadmap. It forces your developers on stressful marches to launch on time. Your sales and marketing, marketing customers, that basically people facing out there, they get these expectations that you can't meet about what you're going to be delivering and when. It means that you're often missing market opportunities in the market because you're too focused on what you thought was a good idea at the beginning of the year or some months ago. And often means that you end up downright building the wrong things. And these things that you're building get stacked up with tech debt because you never actually find the time in between all those little bars on the roadmap to build in time for quality and rework to make sure that it actually fits and it actually serves its purpose. And so this leads to you being a sad product manager. And we don't want this. So is there a better way? Yes, I'm here to talk to you about lean road mapping. And I'm just going to take a quick sip of the water while I chat you through this next. Now, I call it lean road mapping because I love the concept, some of the core concepts of lean. Like lean is about build, measure, learn. Not necessarily in that order, certainly not starting with build. The key part about lean is learning. It's essential to the benefits of lean, and it allows you to apply your learnings to ongoing iterations. And I actually see your roadmap as a tool to help you learn and iterate, but at the strategy level. We have a lot of tools to help us learn and iterate at the more feature level, but what about at the strategy level? So put more succinctly, I actually see your roadmap as being a prototype for your strategy. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we have probably done a lot of prototyping ourselves as product people. We're not necessarily designers, but we play a part in this because anyone can prototype. When you go to build a new feature, you don't run straight in with a fully designed interface that you've put together from scratch. You start with, quite often, a basic sketch, a piece of paper, something that you've sketched out on a Post-it note or a whiteboard or Miro or Sketch or Figma or whatever the cool kids are using these days. And then you take that sketch and you show it to a colleague or a customer or anyone who will listen, anyone who can give good feedback on this. And they give you that feedback. Maybe they tell you that you need to add some copy to make it more clear or move a button over to help them solve the problem better. And the thing is that you take that feedback on board and you throw out that first sketch. And then you make a slightly better one. You take on board that feedback and you learn from it. And you repeat this process by creating these prototypes and sharing with people and getting their feedback and improving on that prototype time and time again until you're reasonably sure that you understand how the feature will solve the problems that you envisioned it would. Now, a roadmap can be similar. A roadmap is a place where you can lay out your assumptions of what you think should be in play in the strategy, what problems you think could be solved along the way. And you should be sharing them with people to get their feedback on it early on. You shouldn't be creating this perfect plan of everything that will be done. It's really important to remember that it's not your job as a product person to know the whole strategy. It often feels like everyone looks to you to tell them what to go do, but it's not your job to know the strategy and write it all down in one go. It's your job to ask the best questions, get collective insights. And one of the best ways of doing that is to, at the roadmap level, lay out your assumptions of what sort of problems and opportunities exist, and then check it with others. And it almost certainly means that your roadmap is going to be iterated on. Like, no one's going to create a perfect roadmap the first time, but what you're going to do is you're going to take that roadmap, you're going to share it with somebody and say, I think we should go this way. And then somebody else says, but what about that problem over here? And you go, oh, that's a good point. Yeah, okay, well, if we do it this way, then we also get that problem. And somebody else might come and say, well, actually, that problem isn't a problem anymore because AI just solved it. So you can take that off the roadmap. And so based on this feedback, you end up with a better roadmap that is stronger. It represents a stronger version of your strategy that's more likely to solve the problems that the business needs it to. So a great product manager leads their team in a collaborative road mapping process and uses a flexible roadmap format to capture their assumptions so that they can get it checked regularly. The value isn't in the roadmap. That gets thrown out. The value is in the road mapping process that you run. Now, one really fundamental thing to remember is that product is a big unknown. You're building into uncharted territory. No one's ever done this. There's no right way. There's no blueprint to follow. You're landing on a new unknown shore, and you know that you want to get to that big gold-topped mountain in the distance, but you have to pick the best path out along the way. You got certain resources with you now, and you'll pick up more resources and knowledge along the way, but it's up to you and your team to survey your surroundings and decide what you have and what problems you need to solve as you go. Every product is a unique journey. Everyone here is building a different product from each other and a different product than what the predecessor did in a different market, in a different space. No one is building the exact same product. So this is where the concepts of time horizons come in. I mean, you're standing here at the present time, what we'd call now. You can see what's keeping your team busy right now and what problems are right in front of you. I mean, it's like you landed on this new shore and immediately saw that there's a bear right in front of you. Like, that is your first problem to solve. It's crystal clear. And unless someone sees a bigger, different problem right next to it, you better start thinking about ways to solve that problem. But you're the product person. You can also see off into the distance, that mountain, that range in the distance that you want to conquer. And there's probably problems to solve there as well. Like, you maybe have to do something like keep warm or get ice climbing gear, but that's too specific right now. You can figure that out when you get closer. You're a long way off, and there's a lot of things you can do to get there to gather resources and knowledge. But if there's known chunky problems, like get to the top of that mountain, then note them down so your team can keep an eye out for ways to break them down as they get closer over the course of the months and the years and the journey ahead, but doesn't take their eyes off the bear that's right in front of them. And you can see off into the middle distance and often, different directions to various levels of degrees. And so, how well you can see depends on how well equipped you are, what your starting position is right now when you landed on this new shore. You might spot opportunities that you can take advantage of along the way that might help you reach your goals, or problems that you might need to avoid or overcome. Maybe there's a glistening city full of money and resources that you could reach on the way, or maybe there's a bog you need to get over. But there's probably multiple paths you could take through this journey. And from where you're standing, you don't really know which is the best one. After all, the further things are in the distance, the less certain you are about them. It might be faster to build that bridge, but it means you're going to miss the uplift in resources if you visit that city. But from here, maybe it's a mirage in the desert anyways. So you got to get a little bit closer before you make that decision. Anyways, you can't just pull out your phone and whip up Google Maps. This is uncharted territory. There is no right answer. But some answers will be better than others. And the best answers come from teams who lay out what they see on the road ahead and regularly regroup to make sure that they're still on the best path. So these horizons translate to a product roadmap. So instead of that timeline, which is the single date-driven line marching forwards, think in terms of these 3 buckets. So you get your now, where you're pretty granular about your focus and your scope. This is the stuff that's being prototyped, tested, and built right now. The later column is less about specific initiatives and is much more about outlining problems that you think need to be solved in order to fulfill your vision. I like now, next, later as column headings. I've heard other people talk about them in other terms. One of my favorites is doing, discovering, dreaming, which helps to identify what sort of things you're doing at each of those stages. Now, I can imagine if you set off on a journey like this, you might have a team that starts immediately bickering because they haven't actually agreed on what they're trying to achieve. They know that they want to reach the summit, but they have no framework for measuring their success. They have no idea what good looks like. And if you have no way of saying whether you're working on the right things, who's to say whether you're working on the wrong things? So road mapping without objectives can be chaos. And this is where you start getting into making your now, next, later roadmap outcome led. But why do so many teams give up on OKRs? I've heard a lot of teams really struggle with OKRs, sometimes because they're not connected to the work that they're doing, or they're moving too fast for OKRs, or other issues like that. So let's talk about OKRs, and let's see if I can identify one of the issues that I think might be causing some of the problems. So OKR stands for objectives and key results. Objectives, part of that, are the high level qualitative measures, right? What does success ultimately look like for the business? Whereas the key results are usually quite specific and measurable. Typically, OKRs are time bound. So you might be working in quarterly cycles is very, very common. Some teams work in shorter cycles, like here at ProdPad, we work in, it's actually 7-week cycles. It's 6 weeks of work and then 1 week of planning and retro time, planning for the next cycle. But whatever works for you, it's usually time bound to set these goals. And the beauty of OKRs is that they get the whole team involved. Like the concept of OKRs is that the company sets the top level objectives, sometimes called the North Star, and the team then works together to decide how they can contribute to that goal. And it's vastly different than the old school way of doing management, where you think of management setting goals for each team and then micromanaging the process and telling them, what each team is going to go do. Means that it's using the knowledge of the whole team to set goals, which means that gaps are more naturally spotted and filled. The team can work more autonomously, and it isn't held up by limitations in knowledge or time by middle or top management. I actually like to think about it as that scene in Fellowship of the Ring. When they're talking about that huge task of getting to Mordor, they got to get that ring into Mordor and destroy it. And they all come together. And one of them says, you can have my sword. Another one says, you can have my bow. And the other one says, you can have my axe. They all looked at what they were up against, what they could contribute, and they worked together to work out until all the gaps are filled and they had enough resources to set off on the journey. Likewise, when you're setting a company goal of something like maximize revenue from a market segment, each team or each area of the team would step in with different parts. Marketing might say, we'll attract the right sorts of customers. Design will say, we'll make a delightful onboarding that converts and retains those customers. Development might say, well, we'll build a solid platform and deliver in a way so that we can iterate often. No one person or no one team is responsible for the North Star, but the whole team together makes it happen. Now, a term that you're going to need to know in the OKR world is initiative. But for some reason, it's like the forgotten middle child. I guess because Oikers doesn't have a good ring to it. An initiative describes the specific activities or projects the team is working on to influence the success of an OKR. Now, even if you identify what you need to achieve, which is the objective based on that company strategy, and determine what good looks like, which is the key results, you're not going to get very far if you're unable to clearly communicate the actions you plan to take in order to get there, which is the initiative. So let's use this as an example. You want to improve your overall health to avoid illness or injury. That's a good objective. Now, you want to break that down into key results, like maybe you're measuring progress by something like, let's lose 15 pounds by the end of the year. Okay. For this one key result, you're not going to just lose the weight by willing it away. You might set an initiative to introduce regular exercise to your schedule, or refactor your diet and start eating well. And chances are you're going to have to make progress on both of these initiatives to hit your goal. And within each initiative, there's a number of things that you can try, all of which will take some time to see some results from. So initiatives are like that glue between objectives and key results. It's the what you're actually going to do with it. And there's a problem that I see a lot of teams running into because a lot of OKR systems miss initiatives, and it leads to this OKR drift. It's what happens when you set up your OKRs in one place, and then you go and do your day-to-day work off in another place. And what tends to happen is that the OKRs get forgotten about. And so when the team goes back to update them at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, the OKRs aren't as relevant anymore because they've been learning and iterating over in the product space and haven't been looking in their tracking space. And so it's one of the reasons why OKRs often fail in teams. I regularly hear people saying things like, the OKRs don't represent the stuff I work on every day, or we move so fast that the OKRs can't keep up. So a solution to this is a lean roadmap. You could also call this the now, next, later roadmap. You could also call this an outcome-based roadmap because it's very closely tied to the objectives and the outcomes. This ties it all together, right? Each of these blocks that you see here are initiatives. They're the problems to be solved. Each initiative is linked to one or more objectives. So this is one configuration. You might see another one which groups initiatives by objective, so you can more clearly see what are we doing to solve this type of, hit this type of goal for the company. But the really key thing is that it takes the focus off of building features and hitting delivery dates for the sake of features and delivery dates, and helps your team strive towards solving problems. And take this chance to have another sip of water. Now, I'm almost tempted to check the chat because I see there's questions, but I know that one of the questions that always comes up next is, how do I get my team on board? Because, to each of you as individual product managers, you go, yeah, absolutely. I want to have a now, next, later outcome-based roadmap. This seems great, but I know if I take this back to my office, if I take this back to my my team, there's going to be pushback. So how do I get my team on board? The real answer is it depends. I mean, this wouldn't be a product management get together if there wasn't an it depends slide in there somewhere, right? Because that's the nature of our jobs. But it's true. It does depend on the context in which you're operating. Who is it that you're getting pushback from? What are they making arguments for and against? There's nuances here, and I'm not going to go into them in this quick warm-up session, but we will have time for questions afterwards. But I can tell you that there are things you can do to convince your boss that deadlines don't make you work faster, or that show your investor that they're wasting their money if they want to work with you in a waterfall way, or get your sales and marketing teams on board with a better launch and customer development flow, so they're not always waiting on you for or you are the devs. Or show your customers that you still have vision and are creating value, even if you can't promise them delivery dates of their pet feature. So happy to take questions on this and, of course, anything else. But one thing I did want to share with you is that we do have a guide. I wrote this guide. It's called How to Ditch Your Timeline Roadmap. It's up here if you want to hit that URL. It's prodpad.com/ditch-timelines. And it has, it's a 6-page guide, and the last page is very much focused on how to convince various stakeholders to get on board. So a really, really solid guide for this. The other thing that I want to share with you, I know how important it is, how valuable it is to have examples to get your team on board. So we actually have a sandbox version of ProdPad at prodpad.com/sandbox, where it's you don't need a credit card to access. You can just access it today, and it's preloaded with example roadmaps, OKRs, ideas, feedback, and everything in a freely editable space. You can show it off to your team and give them an idea as to what you'd want to do with your own roadmap. So with this, I hope that I've helped at least a few of you start making the move away from some old roadmap habits and in with some new, leaner ways of working. And with that, I want to say thank you very much, and definitely open it up for questions. Feel free to ask me here today. I know that there's a bunch of you listening in on other platforms, so I want to hear your questions as well. And also reach out to me. Come find me on LinkedIn, come drop me an email, find me on Twitter or wherever else, and I'd be happy to chat to you there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Janna. I will take over screen sharing in a second, and then we go into the Q&A session shortly afterwards.
Yep, right.
While I'll take over, it's interesting, right? A lot of the wings was not about diplomacy, right? They all came with weapons, but none came with the word. Maybe it was Gandalf.
That's a very fair point. Yep. Right. I'll stop the share so you can take over and share your sides.
Thank you. I think this is it. So you should be able to see my screen again. So basically in the chat here in Zoom, but also in LinkedIn, right in the comment section, please go ahead and post your questions. We basically group them there, and then I will raise the questions here, give them to Janna, and she can basically answer them step by step. We want to basically give all the channels the equivalent basically time, so we don't not only go with Zoom, we also go with other platforms. So that's the reason we group these questions together. While we are waiting to 1 or 2 minutes for these questions to come in, let me just give you a couple of use cases a product people is working on at the moment, for example, as interim factual product manager or product leader for permanent position covers or parental leave covers or urgent initiatives, right? You need to develop the next ChatGPT API implementation, so you can hire us for that. We also do product coaching or consultancy, coach the product management team, for example, with working sessions and workshops, or we create and streamline processes and programs around it. And we also do product discovery. We do discovery for the next impactful initiatives or products, or we run a low-code or low-code pilot or MVP if this is required. What we are not doing is, so we are not recruiters, so we don't do sourcing of your candidates, but we help to appraise candidates or the hiring process, and we are happy to onboard new PMs or POs while we are at the mission. We are not a freelance marketplace, so as I said, all PMs are with us, and we don't basically hand them over to your payroll, so they are basically on our payroll. And we are not a development or design agency. We have contacts, right? So if you need developers or designers, happy to introduce you, but we are very specialized in interim product management, work, coaching, and discovery. Our clients are in the B2C and B2B space, for example, Tier, Freeletics, Backmarket, Ecosia, which is the greener search engine, you can check it out, or Coralie. And on the B2B space, we have, for example, the World Health Organization, Metra, GfK, the biggest analytics company in Germany, Alira Health, Remote, etc. And here are some positive feedbacks from clients. As I said, we are with the teams very much, so hands-on there. So therefore, we have close connections with developers, stakeholders, designers, etc. And they really much share that we work very closely with them together, with zero friction, correlatively, and very much engaged. And we are happy that this continues. Some stats from product people. So we have over 200 cross-functional teams supported so far, over 70 plus clients. We have dozens of product leaders and managers. And we have, which I'm very proud of, also a majority of women in our company, and even like 66% are in the leadership team. That shows basically also our diversity in the organization. Here are some happy faces, and as you see on the bottom right, there is one spot left because we are hiring for business development representative, growth partnership managers, and junior account executives. Here's a link for Greenhouse. Feel free to click on it and look if there's something fitting for you, and drop us an application if you like. And that's basically it. And now we are going into the Q&A session. And what I will do, because there was a very first question I saw from Houston, who asked the question to you, Janna, how would you handle dependencies in between all these teams that have to contribute for reach the same North Star in the scope of the Now Next Later roadmap?
Yeah, such a good question. Thanks for that one. So handling dependencies is always an interesting one. More important than anything, it's lots of communication between teams. The way that we handle it in our ProdPad roadmaps is each card, each initiative has its own URL, its own space. So you can basically link to that from any other place. So you can say on your roadmap, this card is dependent on this card, which might be on a different roadmap. And so you can see those dependencies across them and move from one place to the other as you see what's dependent on each other. The really key thing is you want to keep your roadmap high enough level so that you don't have so much detail on there, so that you're not using it, so you're not tied down in, you're not losing the level of information. You don't want to have something that is going to take somebody way too long to read. Somebody should be able to read it and go, okay, now these 3 things, next, these 4 things, later, these few things, and then see, okay, well, these ones are flagged as dependencies. And that's the level of detail you're going for. One of the problems that you run into is when people go really, really granular and try to say, well, this little feature is dependent on this little feature is dependent on this. And you end up with, 100 different things in each column, or, a timeline roadmap that has, lots and lots of stuff on there. And it's really difficult to see what is actually dependent on what, or what any of it means. So remember, your roadmap is meant to be a strategic document. And so you're talking about strategic dependencies between stuff.
Thank you very much. I have a question here from a viewer on LinkedIn. How do we decide how ambitious we can be with OKRs? It's critical for OKRs to be inclusive and practical for the entire team without looking impossible. But how do we ensure that OKRs are not getting too ambitious?
Right. I mean, the whole thing around, I think a lot of people have heard this one, that you're supposed to, if you've sold your OKRs to, 70-ish%, you've probably done a good job in picking that OKR. It's not that 70% is some magic number. It's really what you're doing at the beginning of the time period. When you're setting your OKRs, you have to come up with something for the y-axis, right? Like, how much it's growing by. And you just need to be able to have that chart so you can measure something by. And all you're doing is you're basically just saying, I'm going to throw this that far. Let's throw that stick that far. We're going to try to get as close to it as we can, doing these things over the course of the period. Now, each time you pick up and throw the stick further away from you, you're making it up, right? You don't know, but you're going to get better at it. You're going to get better at judging how far you should throw it, and therefore how far you could run to it in that time period that you're giving yourself. The whole thing is that however far you're throwing it, however big you're setting that, sets how your chart will look at the end of that quarter, right? So if you're setting it and saying, you know what, I'm just going to do a little toss right here, but actually your numbers came out to here, then your chart's kind of broken, right? Kind of doesn't really show very well. If you come up with this really, really ambitious thing because you think people want to hear something really ambitious, but then actually turns out realistically you could only really do this, your numbers are really hard to tell as to whether, what affected over that period. So really you're just trying to say, like, create a bound box around that chart that you can be measuring. Imagine you in 3 months time and you're looking back and you're measuring that OKR. How do you want that chart to grow? You want to see, hey, it went to here when we did this, it went to here when we did this, it went to here when we did this, and we got 80% of the way there. Good job, us. You don't want to be overshooting your OKRs, because that means you've broken the top of that box, and now you've got to rethink how you're going to be displaying this stuff. It's not actually about how far you're throwing it, because all you're trying to do in reality is just trying to get that number up. You're just trying to set that bound box as to what you're actually going to measure in.
And possibly moving the needle, right? So
yeah, no, exactly. The whole thing is, like, don't worry so much about it if you get it wrong, right? It's like, well, you know what? Turns out we had to rethink our OKRs, and as we were reporting on our OKRs, it kept coming with this ridiculous number, going, yep, we're at 3%, we're at 5%, we're at, that might have been actually as much growth as was expected, because that's what you should have been baselining it in. Whereas, if you overshoot and you're like, yep, we hit 100% first month. Great. Well, what are you going to report second month? What you should be doing is just setting that bounds.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that's a question from Zoom, and it goes maybe to the point you made, like at ProdPad, you have like 7-week cycles, right? Then 1 week of like planning, etc. How long should an OKR cycle be so that that a combination with a now next later roadmap makes sense, right? It blends into each other. How do you do it at ProdPad?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it depends. So we used to do OKRs quarterly because everyone else does OKRs quarterly and the calendar breaks out nicely into quarters. But I actually realized last year that we weren't doing ourselves a service by sticking to quarters. And if you think about it, a quarter is actually just an arbitrary period of time. Some companies like working in it, particularly those in public facing when they have to do quarterly reports and stuff like that. But if you think about it, why quarters? What difference does it make? And so we actually thought about it in terms of how we work as a team, and then realized, well, actually, how we work is we work in sprints that are 2-week long. And, oftentimes things can't get done in one sprint, but over the course of 3 sprints, quite a lot gets done. The problem with quarters is it's 13 weeks, which is a long time. If I were to say to you, what are you going to be doing in 13 weeks time? Or how are you going to be performing in 13 weeks time? It's hard to say. And so, I think 6 weeks is a much more reasonable period to sort of look ahead. Now, that's because we're a web app, right? Web apps move pretty quickly. If we were in hardware or something more slow moving, maybe we'd want to have a longer cycle. But we're not. We have shorter cycles. We've actually shortened that cycle. The other thing that's wrong with quarters, which isn't exactly the right question, but the other thing that's wrong with quarters is you got these 4 quarters, but everyone knows that Q4 is a bit of a waste because Christmas happens and after Thanksgiving, like no work is getting done. So not all 4 quarters are created equally. Whereas what this allows you to do, if you just have these more, whatever pace works for your company, for your team. For us, it's 6 weeks plus 1 week planning, 6 weeks plus 1 week planning, allows us to build in things around stuff. So we don't have one of these things happening over the Christmas break and people can have a little bit of breather between stuff.
Thank you. I take advantage of being the host today and dropping also one question because I think the answer might be very applicable. Like, goes into direction like you go out of this talk and propose the now next later roadmap or the lean roadmap, right, to your product leaders or stakeholders, but you don't want to jump into cold water. What might be like iterations from a Gantt chart, right, from a timeline based roadmap to a now next later roadmap? What have you been seeing so far as working well?
Yeah, my guide, actually, the guide that you shared the link of as well. Thank you. That ditch the timeline roadmap guide talks about how to wean your team off of timeline roadmaps. And one of the things that I see people do is, you can change the headers in ProdPad. So we see people changing it to things like this quarter, next quarter, quarter after that, Q3 plus. And it sort of implies that there is a more nebulous, bigger period beyond that. The thing with the timeline, or the thing with the now next later roadmap, is that it doesn't mean that we live in la la land and have to give up all dates. Most teams don't have strict deadlines for everything that they work on. Otherwise, what are you working on? Are you an agency and you just do client work? At which point you don't need a roadmap, you need a project plan. Most of the time, if you actually push on things, you realize, well, what they're trying to articulate is the order in which things are happening. And then there's this item right here and that item there, which do have hard dates. Because again, we don't live in la la land. Sometimes there are regulatory dates or contractually important dates or strategically important dates that need to be considered. And so you can have a now next later roadmap that still has things in the right order, but dates on the key things that need to be articulated with those dates. And that way, if the dates are on just those things that are important, they stand out more clear, right? In ProdPad, you can add some emoji by it and make them bold, and everybody knows this has to be done by this date. Otherwise, we're breaking the law, or this has to be done by this date. Otherwise, we're not going to bother going to that conference or whatever's happening in your world.
Absolutely. You may have given an eye-opener to some people that they're still working in an agency, working for clients.
Yes, I have another talk. I'd be happy to share the slides and the presentation with people about what it's like to be trapped in the agency trap. Because I have worked in that as well. I joined a company where I thought I was going to be the product manager, but it became clear about a week in when I started scratching under the surface and turning over some rocks and realizing that I was actually going to be the project manager and taking the platform that had been built, not very well, and using it as the basis to create these custom builds for a bunch of clients who'd already been sold. And so month 1 was being wasted on this client, and month 2 was being wasted on this client, and month 3 was being wasted on this client. And yeah, they were paying us, but not enough to justify the team giving up all their time that they could have been spending on discovery to find the more important problems out there. So I talk quite passionately about not getting stuck in the agency trap.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a question from YouTube, from Raf. So timelines are driven by many factors, including revenue generating needs, right? Business reality. Are you suggesting these revenue generating driven timelines should be ignored?
Revenue generating timelines should be ignored? No.
Yeah, exactly. That's a question, yeah.
They might be talking about what I've just been discussing here, which is there might be things on the roadmap that specifically are tied to contracts or things that are going to tie and get the company revenue. No, they shouldn't necessarily be ignored. If something has been contractually agreed and is going to help you get revenue, then go work on it. If revenue is important to the business, then it's not about having done a timeline. It's about doing that stuff first, because that's what is important to the business. Right? At any point in time, you can only work on so many things at once. And so more important than putting things on a timeline and trying to guess when they're going to be done is starting work on the most important stuff first and putting your resources in the right order. If there are hard dates tied to things, I always want to ask why. Where is that date coming from? Is this a hard date and you only get the revenue because you sold that time to a client? At which point, if you've done it once, maybe no problem. A couple times, if you've done it a lot of times, then congratulations, you work for an agency and not a product company. And that's a really tough one to swallow for a lot of product people, because they realize that the roadmap is like that because it actually is a project plan that's been designed for more of an agency style of working, as opposed to a product roadmap, which is meant to help them figure out what problems they could solve to become the best product they could.
Thank you. Marwan, I saw your hand was in the air in Zoom. We'll come to you in a second. No worries. There is one question from Jose, which is very similar to the topic of like release dates or basically like specific like revenue generating events, right? This question was, how do you reconcile a leadership established release date with this methodology? We talked about it. I think it's not being ignored. You do it first, or you really plan it in. But I would love then to go with Andrew's question here. The board, investors, want to have an idea of how the product will look like in 6 months, very typically. Have you had a stakeholder management strategy that worked to tell them it's not worth telling them which specific features will be launched? Like more like which problem you will solve right within these 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, oftentimes people do look to the product person to say, hey, so what are you building? What's it going to be like? And you can give them your vision. You can give them as much information as you have. But remember that even you don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months, because you haven't finished doing all the research, and the iterations come out of that research and the final version comes out of the work. And so you might even launch something and then realize you have to change it because it didn't react well to customers in production. So, you can try to give them a picture of something, but you can't give them a promise of what it's going to be like. You don't even know how big your team is going to be in 6 months, let alone how fast you're able to deliver or exactly what you're going to deliver. So there's so much uncertainty. Now, if somebody's pushing back on this, it's worth pointing out that product managers seem to be the only role in the company that are asked to give this future vision in this concrete way. And it's a bit unfair. I mean, put it this way. Sales teams don't have to do this. No one goes up to the CRO or the VP sales or a salesperson and says, tell me which clients are going to be on our books in 6 months' time. They don't know. What they do have is a pipeline sort of thing, which looks remarkably like a now, next, later roadmap, where they say, well, here's some clients who we've just started talking to. So there's a 10% chance these clients might sign up. Right? We've got this other piece of the pipeline where we're like 30% sure. And these ones, they're about to sign the document. So they're 90% sure, but you don't know, right? And you wouldn't walk up to somebody and say, we expect you to tell me who's going to be buying that $1 million deal in 6 months' time. They don't know. Salespeople actually work in a remarkably refreshing, experimentation-driven way. And product people can learn from that in terms of getting permission from execs and boards. So For example, like the salespeople, they don't plan out, they can't tell you who's going to buy that $1 million deal, but they can say, we've got a pipeline worth this much. What they do is they say, hey, you know what? Let's take the next quarter and let's invest in trying to get these types of customers. And what they'll do for that quarter is they'll invest in salespeople and account execs and BDRs and whoever they need to do the job. And they'll have a backlog of, or they'll have a list of scripts and processes that they follow. And the sales team follows this process and they iterate on the process as they learn. And through that process, they get more customers. And that process is essentially the salespeople picking up phones and calling people or writing emails and emailing people. Each time they do one of those, it's an experiment. All they're doing is they're experimenting. They don't know who's going to pick up the phone. They don't know who's going to reply back. They just know that if they have 20 people doing as many emails and calls as they can, following this process that worked last quarter, then chances are it's going to work for this quarter. And it'll move that number up and to the right. They can't guarantee who's going to pick up the phone or who's going to do what, but they know that by the end of the quarter, someone will pick up the phone and someone will have paid the bills. And that's good enough. And that's all management asks of them, right? We're not asking for any more permission. We're not saying that we're going to tell you exactly which feature is being built when. We want to say, hey, what number is important to you? You want us to get churn down, move the retention from here to here, or user growth from here to here? Cool. Give us space and budget and people and time to put a process together, and we'll run as many experiments as we can. Maybe we'll run 10 experiments, maybe we'll run 20, maybe we'll run 30. We don't know because we haven't actually broken into it yet. We don't know which experiments are going to pass or fail. We know that if we run enough experiments and you give us space to do it, let's say at the end of the quarter, we've run 50 experiments and half failed, but the other half succeeded. I can't guarantee it, but chances are that numbers moved up and to the right. And so we're only asking for that much freedom, is as much freedom as the salespeople have. Marketing is a very similar way. You ever heard this old saying, half your ad dollars are wasted, you just don't know which half. Marketing people, they don't know who's going to look at the ad on the bus stand or, who's going to flip to the magazine. But they know that if they do enough of these ads all over the place, then enough people will come and it tends to work and they repeat that process.
Absolutely. And the learnings are not applicable for the next campaign. That's
yeah.
Oh, thank you for the answer. There is from LinkedIn another question about how you can manage and measure deadlines and outcomes together. But we talked about deadlines and outcomes already quite a lot. And I think for ProdPad, that might be important, right? Like how to visualize deadlines or specific target dates. So I'm jumping into the question from Timo, also from LinkedIn. When talking about outcomes, you basically say that the OKRs describe your outcome. So if yes, how do you prioritize all the OKRs you could think of?
Well, it's not about prioritizing all the OKRs that you can think of. It's part of the role of the product leader is to prioritize the objectives that they think are going to have the biggest impact on the company strategy and the company vision. And so generally speaking, you want to whittle that down to as many OKRs as the team can handle. And if you're a small team, that's one. Pick one. And you might have a couple KRs, a few KRs next to that. But honestly, if you can just have like one objective, one OKR, and set your team on that, then do that. If you've got multiple teams, then you might have multiple objectives. But definitely don't try to do them all. You've got to choose which order you want to tackle things in. And that's what your strategy is. You're basically saying, we think that if we did user growth first and then revenue later, this gets us to here. But if we did this first and then this later, that gets us to here. Okay, well, let's figure out which one we think is best for us. And that's why objectives and roadmaps need to be done hand in hand, because the roadmaps help articulate the order in which you're tackling things. The objectives are just, here's a bunch of things we could do and we want to do. Cool, but what if we did it this? Or what if we did it this, that, the other? And you can change that order to get different results.
Thank you. If Maran is still around in Zoom, please unmute yourself and raise your question, because the text is very long. Maybe you have a shorter version of that.
Yeah, no, actually, that text, we can put you, that's just a comment. Thanks, Janna, for your contribution. I actually just raised my hand because I wanted to point to the book Radical Focus by Christina Vodker. I don't know if you've read that.
Yeah.
But I think it builds on many things you've also mentioned. Actually, what she says over there, if I still remember correctly, is she basically says each function in a company should be having one objective per quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you have then the key results, which is measurable. The key results are measurable, but not the objective. The objective is maybe something more qualitative. Like, when you measure the key results, and if you think you've achieved these key results, basically that should translate to that one objective you define for yourself for that quarter. So in our company, what we do is, for product development, as you know, yes, it's very difficult to say whether you will achieve what you set out to in a sprint. So you keep, that's why we don't define initiatives. We just see where the sprint leads us. And at the end of the 3 month, we then review and use that to define the next OKR for the next 3 months. But actually, what I wanted to point out, I went a bit off track just now, and that's very interesting in this book, because Christina, she advocates to use OKR to help the whole organization to be ambitious. So to really aim high, because that's what I think project plans have this negative effect of making us want to sandbag, because we want to be sure that we are going to be hitting those targets. So the timeline-based roadmap has this risk that the whole organization who is working on that is sandbagging so that they can prove at the end, yes, we achieved it. And that's not in the interest actually of an OKR. Whereas an OKR is meant for each team to think themselves, that's the North Star company level goal, what we can do in chunks of 3 months to get there in a year or so, aim high. And if we don't achieve it, okay, that's how it is. Where there are no guarantees in lives, but you tried. And in the process, what did you learn after that 3 months? And use that learning for the next 3 months. So this is something I would recommend to the community here to take a look at this book, because it gave me a different perspective to OKRs, because the previous perspective I had to OKRs was another way of defining milestones and checking if they were achieved.
Yeah, great. Baron, thank you. Radical Focus by Christina Wadke is a brilliant book. She's actually been on my webinar with me, so happy to share that link around to anybody who wants to see our conversation. Definitely recommend it for anybody who wants to dive deep into OKRs and how it can be transformative for your teams. And as you described, I think you captured it there. And the timeline, the now, next, later roadmap works really well with the OKR approach, as you described. And that's, as you said, one of the problems with timeline roadmaps. I didn't hear a question in there. Do you have a question, or is there anybody else who has questions?
We still have questions, yeah. and Andre, you give me a hand when we are going over time. Thank you. So we have a question here from Ralph in Zoom. It's like, timelines are driven by many factors, right, including revenue generating needs. Oh wait, that's basically a question he also pointed out something else.
We'll go straight to question 2.
Question 2: do you have a preferred roadmap ranking method? For example, Moscow, Wise, weighted scoring, etc. What's your favorite, and maybe you give a reason for that?
Oh, well, actually, I don't really like any of them. I stay away from idea ranking methods, because they stop the product manager from making decisions themselves. Because what happens with all of them is you tend to end up with these problems where you get product people scoring a bunch of their ideas and then taking those scores. And the scores aren't inherently bad. I actually think that's really healthy to give an idea as to whether this is, high impact or low effort, or what your confidence in, or things like that. But the problem is that a lot of these models then say, well, take these numbers and multiply them together, make some algorithm out of it. And what you're then doing is you're taking an assumption and multiplying it with another assumption, which gives you this bigger assumption, which now you've got this number. You're saying, well, this idea is an 82, but this other idea is a 72. But because these numbers are made of such big assumptions in the first place, these numbers aren't really meaningful. But then what happens is the product manager compares them one versus the other and says, well, we have to do the idea that came out as 82 first, not idea that came out as 72. And it's like, well, is that really the best product decision? Because actually you might realize that actually the idea 72 is lined up, but it just isn't articulated well didn't score well for various reasons. And so the product manager sometimes spends their time coming up with their own perfect version of a scoring method. And they spend their time in a spreadsheet coming up with the better numbers and trying to score everything. Or they blindly build what the model told them to, because they heard that, Intercom uses rice or whatever. Intercom doesn't even use rice anymore. It's not that there's no one size fits all. So what I recommend is actually scoring things, if that helps, because it starts bringing up conversations. If you say something is an 8 out of 10 difficult, somebody else might turn to you and say, why do you think that's so difficult? I know a library that we could use to make it so much easier. Or if you say, I think it's going to be a 9 out of 10 impact, somebody might say, what makes you think it's 9 out of 10 impact? I thought it was going to be like a 3. What's so good about this? And you have the conversation. But by trying to turn everything into scores that you multiply together and you come up with these other scores, it's actually absolving you as a product manager from making the hard decision of saying, hey, this one aligns with this piece in our vision. This aligns with this in our strategy. Let's work on this because, and you have to come up with a good reason for it. And all you're doing is trying to prioritize what should be happening next in the business. You don't have to prioritize your entire list of backlog ideas. You just need to prioritize the next key things. So one of the key things with a now, next, later roadmap is that you're extrapolating up to more of the problem level as opposed to trying to get lost in the ideas themselves. So hopefully that helps. Probably not necessarily the answer you're looking for, but I'm always happy to chat that through and more because I'm quite passionate about that one.
Thank you very much. And I think we are going with the last question because we passed 6 p.m. From Lucas on YouTube. Do you have different versions of these roadmaps, right, concerning product maturity and development stage, right? I mean, for example, not launched version 1 on the App Store, or like have version 100 out. Where do you see differences here?
Yeah, so this is one of the other things that's great about the Now, Next, Later roadmap. I mean, for a very immature company, a brand new company who's just started off, their vision might be like 6 months out. It's not a big vision. It doesn't need to be, right? You're just trying to get to the point that you can show that you are providing value. And so now might be what you're working on in the next 2 weeks. Next is next 2 months, and later is, up to 6 months, maybe 12 months sort of thing, right? That's your vision because you've landed on this new shore and you don't have many tools. You don't have any team. You can't see that far ahead. That's fine, right? Whereas to a more mature product organization who's got lots of team members, lots of history, lots of discovery work already done, lots of proof that this is in fact the right market, you can see much further ahead. It's like they've landed on the shore, but they're standing on a big platform they've already built for themselves. And so now might be what they could achieve in the next 6 months. Next might be within the year. Later might be 2, 3, 10 years from now, depending on how far they're thinking in terms of their vision. So the roadmap stretches and grows in time. It's one of the other reasons I really like it, because so many other roadmaps, people just choose 1 year. And for a very small startup, thinking 1 year out is way too long term. You're wasting cycles that you should be focusing on what's happening now. Whereas, for many large companies, 1 year is too myopic. You need to be giving people the heads up on where you're going to be going in 5 years' time from now, so you can keep ahead of the tons of competition.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you very much for basically answering all these questions today. Thank you to the audience. I think we skipped one question, but I think that was a very relevant question. But like we can't so many questions today. That's awesome. Thanks again to the audience.
Thank you. If anybody has further questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to chat.
Yeah. Invitation is out. As I said, this session was recorded. If something went too fast, we watch it on YouTube. Join us on Meetup. Join us on Telegram. We also have a podcast on Spotify, which is awesome. And happy to see you, the audience community, here back in the next community event next week, Tuesday, as always. Janna, thanks for joining us today. That was a nice session. Thank you again. And I wish
course.
you all the best